Hey everyone, those DDoSes just keep getting bigger. You're watching Textron Gang. Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. It's going to be a short week here on the gang. It's the US holiday of Thanksgiving. So a lot of us might be heading out to visit family or heading home to have family visit us. But we probably, I think Wednesday will be our show, and then we'll do one for Friday. Um, but be that whether you're taking off for the Thanksgiving holiday or not, we're glad you're watching and joining us today on Textron Gang as we kick off our Tuesday coverage. Let me introduce you to our fantastic gang that we have for today. We have our friend Stephen Foskett, also our friend JP. Well, they're all our friends. They're all gang members here. JP Morgenthal, Hope Lynch, and Evgeniy. And Evgeniy, I always mess up your last name, but it's Karam. And then, of course, the Dean, Mike Brizard. Gang, welcome. We've got a lot to go over today, so let's dive right into things. You know, over the years, I don't know, maybe it's that spectator in me. I love to see how big a DDoS attack can get, right? They've grown over the years because, we have organizations like Akamai and Cloudflare, these big CRNs that can diffuse these, often terabits of traffic that these DDoS storms create. But it looks like maybe we hit another new, I don't know if it's an all-time high, but Evgeniy, a major attack against Microsoft by a particular, and it's botnets that really, create these storms. Evgeniy, what can you tell us? Or Mike, do you want to kick us off and we'll go to Evgeniy?
Yeah. Just the facts of the case are, at least Microsoft is reporting that I think more than 500,000, basically a half a million IP addresses were involved in this attack, and these things have been steadily increasing all year long. I mean, it seems like there's now a leapfrog to kind of make the next biggest DDoS attack, and it seems to be happening at a rate of almost, a new record every 2 to 3 months or so. Afghani, is that what we're seeing? But is all this eventually going to build to the point where, well, maybe we will take down the internet? I don't know, but what's your concern?
There's a couple of things and they're very, very interesting. If it go 10, 15 years ago, we had DDoS attacks there as well. But the difference that we used to implement a DDoS devices on-prem. Now it's not going to be possible because the device on-prem, it's still very, very related to the amount of traffic and the throughput of the internet you have. So you have to have a DDoS protection in a cloud, whereas the pipe of the provider will be much bigger than the pipe of the end user there. So companies like Akamai, company like Cloudflare, Radware, and many others, F5 as well, have a cloud approach because we need a bigger pipe to be able to clean. And this has become very interesting because we basically switch the way we protect users. Also with DDoS, we can do protection that on demand or protection all the time, depending on the cost as well. And if you look on Microsoft, guess what? They're not using somebody else, at least as far as we know. They have their own protection. Same as AWS, same as GCP. And it's quite a big shift that some of the bigger companies decided to build their own protections, like the clouds, the Azures, the IaaS, instead of using somebody else. So this is definitely a shift because they need to provide and protect their customers and protect themselves as well. About the size and the scale, we not always like to talk about AI, but the majority of the previous attacks, the bigger ones at Mirai botnets, were not controlled by AI. As far as we know, they were controlled by humans. Right now, guess what? We may have a human that control some kind of an AI system that can now much better understand where to attack and how to shift the attack as well. And I think this is what we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing DDoS attacks that are managed by some kind of AI entity to make them smarter and able to shift them and maybe avoid the defenses of the target.
Interesting. You know, I think one of the not problems, it's not a problem, but I think one of the issues we have when we talk about how do we want to defend against DDoS attacks is the fact of the matter is most DDoS attacks do not bring down sites anymore, right? It used to be, Microsoft went dark for a couple hours, or Google was brought down, or what have you. What happens is for most of us, DDoS has become a sort of minor annoyance. I mean, even here at TechStrong, right? We operate Security Boulevard. It's a security site, cyber site. And it's pretty well known. It gets a lot of views. And so it's a frequent target of the bad guys because we're always publishing cyber stuff. And, I'll get notified from our providers once every 2-3 weeks. Hey, we blocked a DDoS attack against the Boulevard today, right? And here's the the metrics and so forth and where it came from, and we and they put it into their normal a crime fighting kind of system there to try to figure out who did it and what's going on. But, and I may see the sites a little sluggish sometimes. Sometimes we don't even see the site being sluggish. So it's kind of, I analogize it to, credit card fraud. Most of us never are victims of credit card fraud in terms of it really cost us money. It's just a pain in the butt. We got to file a claim with the credit card company or the bank, and they credit us back on our account. But it really doesn't cost us anything out of our pocket. It's just an annoyance. DDoS
Interesting analogy, but don't think about that. It's because we shift from on-prem protection. You're not longer protecting your website. Here, it's done somebody else upstream.
Yeah. Right. And that's exactly it. We've put the burden on someone else and let them worry about it. And I think for a lot of us, that's what DDoS has become too.
But I also wonder in listening and thinking about this. Yes, years ago, you probably had an appliance on your network, but now it's up to the hyperscalers. But I think also part of it is them offloading risk, right? So if I want to be safe, maybe I think, oh, I migrate to cloud instead of, being part of the open and decentralized, seemingly more fragile internet, while the one that's controlled by the hyperscalers is more resilient. And also, there are a lot of companies that if they were still having appliances on-prem, it would be older legacy hardware. Forget about regulation updates and all of those things. They probably would still be more vulnerable. So I think a lot are just offloading the risk to the
Yeah,
hyperscalers.
I mean, it makes sense. But let me tell you another side and a victim of this, right? Because how do you block DDoS attacks? Basically, you filter out the IPs that are attacking you, right? So we're getting, whether it's a ping or, whatever kind of traffic you're sending me, I say, okay, this IP, Steven's IP is sending me a lot of garbage and I'm going to filter it out. I'm just going to filter out Steven's IP. But Steven's not sending that on purpose. Steven's machine was zombied, right? And so unbeknownst to Steven, his machine has been added to this botnet and it's flooding my pipe. And so I block Steven because he's flooding my pipe. And Stephen deserved. Now, Stephen didn't deserve it. What did he know? So, but now the problem is when do I turn Stephen back on, and how does it impact Stephen being blocked as a one of the bots
That
of this
that
botnet?
that's a really interesting point, and I've thought about this before, and as you started speaking about it, I started to think about if you specify any time period, then the attackers are just going to learn what that time period is and and turn back that node back on with it after that time period. So it's now you need a process to go through to get validated again, to get cleaned. But I mean, sorry, it's like an STD. You should have to go to the doctor and get cleared before you get to go
I
back
didn't have
on.
that on my bingo card, JP. I got to be honest with you, Stephen.
Well,
What is this? What are they
he was
saying,
infected.
Stephen?
I'm sorry. It's an appropriate level comparison because his machine was infected.
I gotta say, I was enjoying this conversation until that, JP. I swear it wasn't me.
Uh-huh.
But it is funny because the fact that most of these botnets are now using consumer IoT devices. One of the things we pointed out in the article, for example, is that the rise of fiber to the home has made these all the more potent because even a low-powered, device, an IoT camera, thermostat, DVR, router could participate in a DDoS to a much greater extent than it could back in the old DSL days or something. But I agree that I've always felt like some things belong in the network and some things belong on-prem. Email is an application that belongs in the network. Web servers belong in the network. Why? Because they're accessed that way. Whereas other services belong on-prem. DDoS mitigation strikes me as something that belongs in the network, and it should be something that companies like Akamai and Cloudflare and yes, Microsoft are working to mitigate rather than something that we individuals have to fight off because it's really an internet problem. It's like your distasteful analogy. There's a point at which a disease goes from a personal problem to a social problem, and I think DDoS is a social problem. So we have to have companies like Cloudflare, for example, mitigating this. But that being said, think about last week's news about Cloudflare's outage. One of the reasons that it impacted so much of the internet, including all of my sites, including all of our sites, is because we rely on Cloudflare for DDoS protection. And so by doing that, we're essentially putting all our eggs in this very one big, very capable basket. But that does open us up to other issues. And I could see a situation where one of these botnets successfully DDoSes, a Cloudflare, a Microsoft, a Google, and that would be really damaging.
So, at what point, though, Evgeniy, work me through this, William? Because it seems to me like I'm at 500,000 IP addresses. I'm probably this time next year going to be seeing attacks involving 1,000,000 IP addresses. And can I block 1,000,000 IP addresses and figure out when they should be turned back on? And remember, there are multiple DDoS attacks out there. So, at what point is this just going to become unmanageable?
So somebody need to run and manage this DDoS attack. I believe we already have some kind of an AI operated or half AI operated system that help me to run this attack to be more manageable on the bad guys. This is going to become the part on our side, on the good guy side as well, to use some kind of intelligence, artificial intelligence, to help us understand what to run. Now, when we say block these IPs, we're blocking them to access our sites. It doesn't mean we're blocking them to access other sites. We're potentially making them this IP higher on a blacklist, and then maybe we're going to block emails from these IPs, or their reputation will go down because they have reputations list everywhere else as well. So there may be potentially going to be blocked somewhere else. For example, if I'm a small business and from my IP, a DDoS launch, my IP reputation now goes higher or better, whatever you want to say this. Now, potentially my emails may be blocked or other connections from me may be blocked somewhere else. But to answer your question, we will need a more sophisticated system to understand how this attack evolved and to block it as well. So we will need to find a way, and majority of the vendors right now use AI in one way or another. Not many people talk right now about AI-based DDoS protections. We have firewalls that are more AI aware right now. DDoS and AI, I didn't hear yet, but I'm sure all the providers have something that helps them evolve.
That makes sense.
I know someone who you can call to help you. I in doing a little research for this. So Isaru, who they say are responsible for it, one of the prime people, he's based in Brazil. Not only is he part of the attackers, but he runs a DDoS mitigation service.
So
So
he's playing both
he
sides
knows
of
how
that
he
street.
attacks
Yeah.
and he knows how to defend.
Well, those
Makes
are the
sense. You
best
have to know
kind.
both.
Those are the best.
Isn't that like just morally wrong? I'm sorry. Let's clarify.
He's setting the house on fire and putting out the fire.
It's,
So yeah.
it's good. But you know, it does bring up the issue though that these botnet networks are oftentimes run by pseudo state, country state actors, or at least supported by state actors. And now we have seen in the past police activity, law enforcement activity against some of these botnet operators where it made sense, and they've taken them down. Microsoft's done a good job with
There's
that.
always one to pop back up on the
Yeah, well,
state
that's the
spot.
problem. It's a bit of a whack-a-mole game.
And now all these hacktivists are renting those services to bombard anybody that you happen to
Well,
disagree
yes,
with.
you could rent a DDoS storm.
What JP said about me earlier, I think I might rent a DDoS, JP. What's your address?
Uh-huh.
I think you're taking this a little too personally.
Well, no,
I
but
usually
Stephen,
think this-
the key
You're-
is though, after you DDoS them, then you come in and offer to
Oh, so
to
the
defend it.
old mafioso
yeah,
game,
exactly.
huh? I have a kid break your window,
Right,
and then
be
I show
a
up the
shame
next
if
day and say,
something
"I'll
happened,
protect you."
right?
Yeah. But to Stephen's point earlier about IoT devices, you have Amazon, you have Google, right? They're hosting the network services for a lot of these devices. I hopefully they're smart enough, and their equipment is becoming enabled with enough compute power and OS that it could be compromised. So I hope they're smart enough that when these devices are coming online and connecting back home, that they're doing so through a VPN level connection. We don't know because we don't own those devices. We can't see how they're connecting. But think about, and I don't mean to pick on them. I don't know anything about them, but Honeywell. My thermostats connect back to Honeywell. I haven't seen Honeywell in the news talk out and stepping up about their advanced capabilities for security and DDoS protection. Maybe they're delegated through a Microsoft and partnership or a Google partnership to protect themselves. But Honeywell's now, the risk is on them. They're the ones who are capable of now opening up potential for IoT devices on their network to be compromised.
Yeah, well, and to that point, I think a lot of these companies with IoT devices are finding out that this is a challenge. I'm pretty mad at BMW because they shut off third-party integration with their connected drive experience last month. The reason they did that is because it was realized that there was almost no security on it, and anyone could find out the status of anyone's car and actually write settings, including unlock, to anyone's car. That's not great, and so they shut it off immediately. And I think that there's a lot of abandonware out there. There's a lot of just garbage out there. You go buy an IoT, an off-brand IoT switch or thermostat or something. You don't know how well that's protected. It's probably not, and it's certainly not going to get any kind of security updates. That's the world we live in, and I think a lot of respectable and responsible companies, like I said, like BMW, I'm kind of mad that they shut it off, but I'm glad that they did too, because I'd rather not have my car unlocked by somebody over the internet.
So wait, is there an opportunity here for somebody to, I don't know, sell a managed botnet? Let's not use JP's metaphor. Let's go with an extermination service so that I get rid of all my infected devices, and I'm just going to pay extra for the privilege? Or is this something that just I'm the CDN?
Nobody gonna pay for this. Like, think about that. Well, somebody need to pay for this. Government? Who? Which
And
government?
we don't own the devices, right? So I don't have access to my Amazon Dock. I can't get inside it. I can't, exterminate anything that's in it. I can't. It's not on me.
right? And so this, and we don't have time because we're way over time on this. But if you look at it was DigiCert and a bunch of people put together an industry consortium for these connected devices, and it starts with each connected device having its own unique MAC address and its own unique certificates, PKI certificates, and so that you can reach in and control individual IoT devices, but only if they've been built to do so. And there are several industry consortiums around that. I've actually done some work in there over the years, but at the end of the day, they're all still connected, and the bad guys always seem to find a way. But we got to take a break. This is a great conversation, great topic. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Tennessee Titans. No, not those Titans, different data center Titans. You're watching Textron Gun.
You've earned it. The spotlight, the responsibility, the weight of teams, companies, and entire industries fall on your shoulders. Lives depend on your decisions, your home life included. At work, you're protected, physically and digitally. Nothing gets through your team without a fight. But in a globally connected world, everyone sees you, including those who mean to cause you and your organization harm. And now home, your sanctuary. Attackers see an opportunity. Your digital front door is wide open. And what compromises your home can breach your boardroom. Because the devil's greatest trick isn't targeting your workplace firewall. It's convincing you that your personal life isn't at risk. Black Cloak. Digital executive protection, defending the new attack surface. Your personal life.
Hey, folks, we're back, and yeah, we're talking about Tennessee, home of the TVA. And it turns out there's a report that says that the state of Tennessee, followed by Texas, is now number 2 for AI data center deployments. And of course, California and Virginia are probably number 1 and 2 overall. But it's interesting to see that there's been a shift in terms of where these AI workloads are showing up. JP, did any of this surprise you in here? And are we using, government-funded electricity to drive these data centers in Tennessee?
It wasn't. It was a little surprising only because geographically, my experience was that North Carolina was on the rise. Back when I was at EMC, there were a number of data centers that were being built in North Carolina, all very modern. The access to the cooler temperatures, fresh water, and electricity, made them a optimal site for building out data centers. Now it seems that people have found that Tennessee also meets the same requirements. It's like a little bit like the old Star Trek or sci-fi shows where they're out there looking for a planet that meets your needs for life and support. If we find the place, they're going to settle it, and to the Matrix point, right? They become parasites and start to overempower and destroy the environment. And that's what the report kind of is saying. It's like, all right, these beasts that are in need of massive compute power, especially around AI, are identifying environmentally good places to put a data center that supports their needs, but they're destroying the environment that is around it, and these are areas that are impacted by climate and other events that are going on. And the recommendation was, start looking at places that aren't so environmentally impacted, like the Midwest. And of course, the Midwest has its own issues for why it hasn't, risen up with regard to becoming a titan of, support for building out these facilities. But the reasons are, and I agree with the report on this, is because it's easy. I have everything I need to run my data center in these areas, so it makes sense for me to do it. It's more work to do it, and obviously a little costlier in the Midwest, but I do less damage to the surrounding environments. And I think you're going to, and it would take regulation to force these companies to start to, or incentive. I mean, the states, that one of the uh, suggestions was the state should be incenting the businesses that come there, and by helping them and partnering with them. I think they should. I do think it's that, these other areas are being inundated, and it's starting to overwhelm the environment.
Well, before we go any further, though, I just got to say this. Mike, the New Deal called, they want their TVA back, Boomer. I don't know how many people out here actually know the TVA or how big a player it is in the energy energy space, creating electricity. But Stephen, I thought Ohio was the new data center capital. What's going on?
Hey, I ain't the governor of Ohio. What do I know?
Lucky for
No,
you and for us.
Yeah, I think I'm going to miss out on that election too. But I would point out that there's actually a very specific thing happening in Tennessee, and that is that in Memphis, xAI is building the world's largest GPU-powered supercomputer, the Colossus. So, for example, in this story, it's reported that there's 1.2 million GPU chips being, that have been deployed in Tennessee. Well, publicly, 200,000 of those, are part of a single AI supercomputer run by xAI. And so that is, a significant proportion of that entire footprint. Now, obviously, there are others as well, and we're seeing build outs and data centers everywhere. But I think that the fact that xAI has focused on Memphis specifically, they've got at least 2 data center locations there. They have at least 2 colossal AI supercomputers deployed there. That alone, that single investment could skew the results and skew the conversation we're having. Maybe apart from that, it's Indiana, Ohio, North Carolina, whatever. It certainly wouldn't be part of the equation if it hadn't been for xAI. And I should also point out that that's been very controversial because despite the fact that on their own homepage, they have a community and environmental responsibility page, the community seems to disagree with the level of community responsibility and environmental responsibility they've shown there, using things like portable gas-powered turbines to power their data center rather than, because they can't get enough grid power in there, things like that. And I would say, there certainly is a conversation to be had, but it's an example of what happens when companies are allowed to essentially shop jurisdictions for these data centers. They can go around and they can say, who wants it? Who wants this kind of investment? Memphis raised their hands, and so, here we go. xAI poured it in there, and suddenly Tennessee's on the map. Next time, maybe Des Moines will raise their hands, or, Albuquerque. And then what? Well, then we'll have somebody else on the map. And, I think it shows, frankly, a weakness overall of governmental planning and environmental planning, site planning, power planning, that these things are just being built sort of wherever they can build them, and that shifts the landscape so deeply.
So is it safe to say we're walking down to Memphis?
Sure. See, I was going to do a whole "Oh brother, where art thou?" They're building the dam. They're lighting up the whole valley. It's going to be a new South.
So wait, so there's an economic cost here, right? I mean, if I understand this correctly, the value of the real estate around the data center drops, and then of course the data center people buy it even cheaper, and more people are going to move to places where there are not data centers. So the value of real estate will go up in places where there is no data center because more people who used to live next to a data center are trying to move in there. Is this
Wouldn't
kind
you
of
get it
like
was
silly?
so? I don't think that that's really what happens. I think that basically the underprivileged people who live where these things are built can't move and don't have any, real mobility opportunity. And so they just get stuck with breathing bad air and listening to loud noise and paying more for electricity.
It's the love canal syndrome. But I mean, but let's be fair though. You can't blame Memphis. You can't blame Ohio or North Carolina or Abilene, Texas, or any of these places that are, bending over backwards to welcome in these data centers because, they're being romanced and courted by millions, tens of millions, if not billions of dollars of investment locally. The promise of major jobs, even though we know that these AI data centers are not very labor intensive in terms of job creation. Uh, you know, the federal government is patting them on the back saying, go for it, go for it, go for it. And they're in competition. Memphis doesn't want to lose to Nashville. Nashville doesn't want to lose to Charlotte. Charlotte doesn't want to lose to Raleigh. Texas doesn't want to lose to California. And none of us want to lose to Mexico. And so, what's the right answer here? I don't know if there's a right answer.
I have a question that I would love to get your opinion on. So right now, AI data centers are being called critical national security infrastructure, right? Even saying Oak Ridge is Manhattan Project 2.0. But the Pentagon's, a lot of the cloud capabilities, you've seen the contracts that Microsoft and AWS have inked with the US government, but you've got military national security running on commercial infrastructure. So they are depending on the same data center, maybe that, is giving me Netflix, right? But now we have the power consumption concerns. And for years, they've talked about the fragility of the power infrastructure in the United States. They are projecting that the data centers are really going to overwhelm Northern Virginia. They are saying by 2030, instead of just 2 or 3 hours of power interruptions per year, it could go up to more than 400 hours of power interruptions per year. So now, if you loop that back, now, what kind of national security issues are we running up against if we do not have a reliable backbone?
I mean, clearly, power is the bottleneck for AI factories. And whether we talk about building thorium small reactors or these nuclear reactors that go in like a container, or I don't mean a Docker container, I mean like a shipping container, um, or some other, because hope that the idiocracy of the whole thing is at the same time we're saying, wait a second, let's stop investing in solar and wind and renewable clean energies, even though they hands down are the biggest driver. Stephen's an expert on this. He could tell us. Right, Stephen, isn't like 90% of the power coming on was coming from renewables?
An awful lot of it was. Yeah, sir, there's a lot of gas turbines, but there ain't no nuclear, despite the legend and rumor. There ain't no new oil and coal and so on. For the most part, it's been solar and wind, but that's all changing now. And here in the United States, at least, in other countries, China has built out in Mongolia enough power to basically replace everything in the United States, and they're using that to power their data centers and along with their industrial expansion. It would have been good if the U.S. had made similar investments.
So, Alan, will this become a political issue to the point where, as Tip O'Neill once pointed out, all politics being local, that the people in these local communities are going to start voting out the quote unquote bums who made these deals, and maybe they're going to be a little bit of a rebellion in the process?
So it already is a political issue. Right now, look, my son recently left Abilene, Texas, where he was based for a year and a half. I could tell you it was a tremendous feather in the cap of Abileneites, or whatever they call people from Abilene, that they were building out these huge data factories, these huge AI factories there. it may be a case where all of a sudden, oh, they didn't tell me they were putting a coal plant in too, right? And Grandpa has black lung now, and then all of a sudden it's a different tune. But right now, I think cities are vying to, in this lottery of who's going to get these giant mega factories, AI factories, but that may change. But anyway, we're over time already on this one. We've been just pontificating a bit. Let's come back though. Let's hear about a company I always thought as a leader in the AI space, Nokia. You're watching TechStrong, gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back, and yes, we're talking about Nokia that pledged $4 billion to accelerate AI networking specifically and here in the United States. And of course, the issue, I think, in a lot of people's minds, or maybe most folks don't realize, that Nokia owns Bell Labs, which is one of the preeminent research facilities here in the US. And I think they're trying to maybe make sure that nobody in Washington comes after them for being a company that's fundamentally based over in Scandinavia. Stephen, what's your take on what's going on here? And will other networking companies kind of step up? Because, well, we haven't heard a lot from networking companies in this whole AI investment space.
Yeah, I think that Nokia is really taking, they're kind of stepping out of the shadows here. They have new management. It's been very aggressive, a new American-born CEO who's very interested in putting Nokia on the forefront of networking technology. And they have done some really remarkable things to move that forward. Key among those is hiring a bunch of incredible people, as you said, making incredible investments as well. But also focusing really on, practical technologies. They're doing things using things like SR Linux, their IXR, which we saw at Networking Field Day 39. All of these things are really key to putting Nokia on the map as generally a networking company. But of course, it's 2025. So if you're a networking company, you're looking at selling into the AI space. And of course, that is a very, very tasty market. You look out at what's happening in the market. There's a lot of OEM stuff using Broadcom, especially silicon. There's a lot of investment happening from companies like Cisco, like HPE, trying to push into that market as well. Obviously, if you're a company like Nokia that has really solid interconnecting technologies, switches, and so on, you're going to be looking at that market too. So I would say, kind of stepping away from the sort of political aspect of making promises to invest in America, I think there's sort of a nuts and bolts business aspect that's happening here, and that Nokia is trying to establish itself. It found the right market for its products, and it's stepping up. If you do want to learn more about that, by the way, we did post the Networking Field Day presentations from Nokia on the TechStrong TV. You can also find those at the Tech Field Day YouTube channel. And to the point of this story, we're actually going to hear a lot more about this at our AI Infrastructure Field Day coming up, where Nokia is going to be presenting basically the technology that's underlying this announcement.
JP, are the workloads going to become more distributed? I kind of feel like when I look at these data centers today for AI, they're kind of like, a replay of these massive mainframes. But are the workloads going to get more distributed across networks, not only within the data center, but between the data centers?
I think there's an issue that I'm seeing, or that I read about as well, that raises question to that, which is, do we want to put the responsibility and our capabilities in the hands of a few number of companies that are owning all this infrastructure? And right now, in fact, the article I read was about that there is concern, and some professor somewhere has come out and stated that this is breaking anti-monopolistic practices and laws of the United States
Hold
for
on,
years.
am I in a dystopian time warp? The whole goddamn economy's run by 8 or 9 companies. Forget just the data centers. That's the story of our existence right now. 80% of the gain in the S&P 500 is on 7 companies. Half of the US GDP growth is on AI stuff. Now you're worried about a concentration in too few hands?
Well,
I
maybe,
always worry,
maybe,
but
Don't close the
I'm glad
barn
we
door
found the
now.
passion point. I'm
maybe,
glad we found the passion, something you're passionate about, Al.
I
maybe,
am
maybe,
passionate. I think this is
maybe, maybe,
a
maybe the way
disaster.
to resolve that particular issue is to distribute more of the workloads to other places besides those 8 companies.
That's not what
JP,
happens, though. People don't want to. It's always the same old problem. Vendor lock-in still happens. People, the more that companies do to try to avoid vendor lock-in, the more expensive it gets. Vendor lock-in, that's the ongoing rage. I'm going to avoid. I'm going to go out of my way and cripple and hurt, and cause extra pain to myself because I don't want to commit to any one of these vendors because I might want to move. And look, we've all been trained by the mobile companies on this problem. Yeah, a few people in IT have suffered small pains of this over years, but the world as a whole has learned this lesson from the mobile companies, right? Think about how hard it is to change your mobile phone provider. Okay. They've tried to make it easier, right? We'll switch your phones, but it's the most painful thing in the world. My phones are different. I have to swap out all my phones because my phones only work on their network. And, it's painful. And the same thing occurs with these systems, right? And just commit, deal with it, right? We now have AI coding. Throw away what you got, rebuild it tomorrow with Claude.
So, at the risk of sounding jaded, for
Us jaded?
Is that a risk?
That wasn't jaded. What I
no,
just said.
I'm going to say something. At the risk of sounding jaded, what's a measly $4 billion today?
Well,
2.5
we're
weeks of profit.
yeah, think about it this way. These things are not, storage and networking, the entire industry could fit into a sidebar or footnote at the annual reports of these massive AI companies simply because they're spending so much money. A $4 billion investment, though, I mean, step away from it. I'm sorry to do this, but let's focus back on the topic here, which was Nokia making an investment, right? A $4 billion investment would be a massive investment for a company of the scale of Nokia and
Absolutely.
would really move the needle in terms of the network infrastructure, AI hardware, AI connectivity, AI ops. Yes, it's not huge in comparison to the amount of money that's being spent on these AI data centers, but it is huge in comparison to the size of the enterprise and HPC networking market.
Can
But
Nokia,
another
can Nokia add the value though? Can they really do it? I mean, do they have the the resources and the staff to really make a difference here? I mean, from a research perspective.
Well, that's what this investment is going for. They're going to be spending a huge amount of money
but they're
trying
not only
to.
spending, they are going to get federal broadband subsidies, right? So there is $42 billion in federal broadband subsidies available. It's called the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, right? Nokia, I think it was last year, they became the first technology vendor to self-certify that all of their fiber products are built in America. What is it called? BABA compliant. Makes me think of Baba Yaga, so I have to pause when I say it. But BABA compliant, right? And they right now may be the only one. So if anybody is looking at complying with that and getting part of that $42 billion pot, which I am sure Nokia has a great head start on, they're probably going to go to Nokia because Nokia is already certified.
And that is a very good point. I think that, Hope, is really the crux of what Nokia is promising here. They're saying we are the American supplier, which is ironic considering that they, were a European company, but now they're saying like, look, we're the Buy American supplier, and that could move the needle.
Good for
That's
them.
like that's
It's
like
a smart
going to
move.
that's like going to IKEA for the 4th of July. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's very American now.
I love IKEA.
I love the meatballs.
Well, good for Nokia, though. Guys, I hate to do this to you, but we're about out of time for today's episode. I wish we could go on more about it, just having some fun. But we'll be back tomorrow, and we can talk about it some more, talk about stuff some more. But for now, Hope, JP, Stephen, Mike, thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this. As usual, we have a full TechStrong TV lineup immediately following the gang today with some great stuff, I think including some of our most recent KubeCon coverage. And I think we might, Stephen, there's a short week, I know, but not much Tech Field Day on this week.
Well, we don't have new Tech Field Day presentations, but of course, we've got the brand new Security Boulevard podcast and the new Utilizing AI podcast, both this week on TechStrong AI and Security Boulevard.
Excellent. So stay tuned for that. And you can get those podcasts, by the way, on whatever your favorite podcast platform of choice is.
And in America, it's Thanksgiving this week.
Thursday is Thanksgiving, but we'll be here. We'll be here tomorrow.
Hey, I want to point out that TechStrong Gang and TechStrong TV is made in America.
You're willing to certify that? How do I know where Stephen is
I literally
today?
almost fell off my chair.
Hope, is
I'm
there
actually
anything?
coming to you from my secret lair beneath a volcano in St. Lucia.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you can do whatever you
But
want.
Hope, can we qualify for any kind of government billion-dollar handouts
You
for
know
that?
what? I bet there is some way to work that out. I tell you. Let's ask Claude.
All righty.
Let's go back to the beginning, to the AI story.
I think, look, we've descended. We're going to pull the plug right here, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.